We're going live? Oh, hi. Thank you for joining us for tonight's conversation. And before I introduce the candidates joining us tonight, I'd like to take a few minutes to say some words on what's happening right now. It's been an exhausting week, and today has been one of those days where we're really not sure what's our next step. As we set to reopen our great day this week, as a mother and another sister, aunt, and friend, personally, I'm struggling with this racial divide, and like many of you, I have been profoundly disturbed by the recent deaths of Mr. Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and sadly so many others that have lost their lives. That has led to waves of protests, coast to coast, civil unrest, pain, and suffering while in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. As I watch, my heart sinks. I feel the outrage and the anger everywhere. I stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters. We are not here to fight one another. We are here to raise our voices and usher in a new decade of integrity, respect, decency for people of all colors, skin, gender, age, and religion. We have a race crisis on our hands. We have a pandemic crisis that we're dealing with. We have an important election in June and November. Tonight's conversation is a shift from the regular live format. The first segment will be talking candidates with part-time data commissioners and the primary ballot, and in segment 2, we will have a community conversation to unpack what's happening locally, nationally, and put into perspective our role as change agents. Here we go. We're going to meet the candidates that have agreed to participate tonight. We extended invitations to all the candidates in Commission District A, C, and D on the primary ballots. 3 candidates agreed to participate, 2 declined, and no response from the remaining candidates. So I welcome the 3 candidates that have joined us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. And so for the format of tonight, I know your time is very valuable and there's a lot of things going on right now. And so what I will do, I'll give each candidate the opportunity to introduce themselves for 1 minute. And what I'll do, I'll start with Hunter King because your department, your Commission District C. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joe, for allowing me to talk a little bit about my historic campaign. What makes this campaign historic is that if elected, I would be the very first licensed foster parent to serve in the commission. While others kind of just talk, I became a single foster parent devoted to raising higher level of care and at-risk youth. I've been lucky enough to father 15 and adopting 2. And what also makes it historic is I would be the first combat veteran to serve in the commission in almost 30 years. A month after 9/11 happened, I was one of those people that decided to sign up, join, serve my country, and I would like to continue doing that in the commission. I would also be the very first openly LGBTQ commissioner in Clark County history. And as we're entering Pride Month, the historic Pride Month, I'm reminded again about the historic step we could be taking together. We need commissioners that are innovative, forward-thinking. That's one of the reasons that I am the only one in my race that have received national endorsements from the LGBTQ Victory Fund, Run for Something, Vote Pro-Choice, and Democracy for America. I've received numerous local endorsements from Nevada Now, Clark County Black Caucus, Las Vegas Sun newspaper, multiple veterans organizations, and dozens of small businesses, along with my fellow foster parents. So hopefully we can talk about some of these issues that we both love together. Again, my name is Hunter Kane. I'm running for Clark County Commission District C.
Okay, you're up next, Isaac.
Yeah, I thought I was going to go ahead and just for a minute. I thought I was going to match Hunter there, right? Hello, Hunter. Good to see you, brother. But I saw he for up there, so I decided to go ahead and throw up mine real fast too. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Isaac Barone. I've been a councilman in the city of North Las Vegas since 2013, but for 25 years, I've also been a teacher at Rancho High School. And the people who are running in my race, Clark County Commission D, I'm the only one who has any local governing experience. And the experience that I bring is being a part of a member of a team that brought back the city of North Las Vegas probably at the lowest point of its history, economically speaking, when easily about here in the core of downtown, easily about 15 to 20% of the houses were foreclosures. And really 89030, 89031, 89010, I'm sorry, 89081. We're like in the top five percentile of the most foreclosures. We brought back the city by starting innovative programs that attracted businesses, that got people back to work very quickly. We increased services, we increased parks, we diversified our workforce, including having, like, for instance, right now we have a very diversified upper staff. We did everything without having to increase any taxes and getting people back to work and making the city of North Las Vegas probably the model for governance here in Southern Nevada. So that's a little intro for me.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilman. Hunter, in my research, in an interview you did, you mentioned you wanted to introduce a veterans in Clark County. And my question, like anything else, when you're adding new staff, new departments, that requires funding. How do you plan to, when introduce a veterans department, which is needed in any municipality, how do you plan to fund that?
That's a great question, Joe. So one of the very first things that I want to do on the commission is to do an audit of multiple, if not all, of the different agencies that it falls up under. You know, I hear quite often stories about positions that are not literally being utilized, about resources that are being squandered in certain areas. I don't want to put any department on blast right now, but after doing an audit of those different type of organizations, the type of department that I want to create is not going to be another giant bureaucracy. So I am a 38-year-old single foster dad who was in combat. And if I need help for mental health, for housing help, employment, whatever it is, I should be able to walk into an organization and they should give me a list of all of the Southern Nevada organizations that are there to help me. So I can do that on the federal level. You know, they have this giant directory of call this 800 number and maybe you'll get through. But on the local level, a lot of veterans don't know that there's organizations out there that are not affiliated with the VA that give you free mental health counseling. Or if I need a comfort animal, there's a great organization called Vets for Pets. Or a lot of people don't know that if you need assistance with rent or utility, that there's those organizations that are local that are out there to help. So what I would want to do is literally create that directory. One of the great things also, you know, I'm a former director of outreach services for Congresswoman Dina Titus. And one of the things that we were trying to do in that office was that we were doing our best to see if we couldn't pass a legislation to be able to vet some of these organizations that are saying that they're out there helping for veterans. It's very difficult to pass a huge bill like that on the federal level, but on the local level, on the county level, it's very easy for us to turn around and vet these are the legitimate organizations, these are not the legitimate organizations. So there's a few things I want to do that actually won't cost a lot of funding, and we can actually just start it right now with our community partners.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Flanagan. Before I get to you, candidate Barone, let's have candidate Flanagan introduce herself. You have 1 minute to introduce yourself to our listening viewing audience.
Good evening, Joe. Nice to see you and everyone else. I'm Tanya Flanagan. I'm running for Commission District D. I've lived in the district for over 20 years. My family's been here for over 50. I started as a reporter, spent some time in gaming with MGM Mirage, now MGM Resorts International, and currently I'm with the county. Been with the county almost 20 years running for the office. Huge focus on healthcare, currently the interim executive director for Susan G. Komen, Nevada. As a 3-time breast cancer survivor, it's near and dear to my heart. Lost my mom to the disease as well, and I help a lot of other women and just women in this space. So healthcare is a huge focus. I think the county can be a leader, and as we come out of the coronavirus space, there'll be a need to look at healthcare as a whole here and across the nation. I think we can take a leading position on that, especially in District D. But happy to be here this evening to talk about that and a number of other issues. along with the other candidates, and just get to allow voters to get to know who we are and allow us to just have a good conversation that's healthy. There's a lot going on in our nation right now. So this is an interesting day to have a conversation about how we see what we see the vision to be for our community. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Councilmember Rowe, my question for you is, you talked about your role, and I'm very familiar with your role in North Las Vegas because I live in North Las Vegas, and I remember when our city was on the verge of, I would say, bankruptcy, even though that's a very strong word. And you were a part of that team to help restore our city by bringing in industry to help at dollar store tax base. With the coronavirus as it is right now, the lockdown of so many entities in Clark County and the jurisdiction for Clark County, would you be looking at with your colleagues, if elected, to raise our taxes? Because that's a big question that you probably are hearing while you're out there meeting with constituents to earn their vote. They probably ask about taxes. So what would you do? Are we looking at a potential tax increase to help generate additional revenue for our base here, so that we have dollars in our coffer to manage the county? It's a long question.
Well, raise taxes to go ahead and help billionaires pay for things that they could have paid for themselves. I don't think so. I don't think that's something that anybody here in our valley who cares about the direction wants to talk about. In North Las Vegas, we didn't raise any taxes, and what we did, we got really lean. Listen, there's two things that the government has to do. They have to get lean, and I think Hunter already kind of alluded to it. If you know the kind of waste, there's just a few things that I found out about, things that go on in the county, how vehicles are purchased, and then within a couple of years they're auctioned off for just a fraction of what the county paid for them. You hear those kind of things, right? And me as a taxpayer, it makes me want to throw up. In North Las Vegas, we didn't have that luxury. We didn't have the money in the first place. So we had to just grow extremely lean, and cutting out things like Hunter mentioned, that's going to be a priority. But the other thing is, you have to get people back to work. Anybody who's ever tried to do any sort of a building or start a business in county knows that's an ordeal. Okay, you're talking anywhere between 9 months to a year and a half to get basic things done that don't take that long. In North Las Vegas, we started a program like over-the-counter business licensing, expedited plans checking. We had to actually go and restructure our entire government to make it a government that works for people. And part of it had to be, we had to put people in positions of change that understood that their salary is all dependent upon upon service to the community. I know that's really hard sometimes. You have some bureaucracies that I don't think quite understand that. But for instance, for anyone who wants to start a business, especially if you're a person of color, the biggest thing is once you have your loan and you've begun to already pay interest on that loan, the time it takes from you to go ahead and get started on your business model to actually opening up the front door and start getting money in, that's a critical period. And for people who look a little bit more like us, that's where the failure point is. If you can't hurry up and get a profit going soon enough, your business is going nowhere. So in North Las Vegas, what we did is we did everything we could, literally, to get businesses going in a positive manner. And we didn't have money to shell out to attract businesses. We took it like this. We made our government lean, reactive, nimble, and responsive. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we started 15, 20,000 jobs in the logistics market there, right? Sephora, The Honest Company, Amazon, of course, and that's just one sector. And quite frankly, before we start looking at raising taxes, and I'm totally against it. Again, that's raising taxes on people who right now can't afford it anyhow. you start raising taxes on businesses who already they're looking at teetering on the edge, they're going to go under. What I propose instead is we go back and restructure the government there in county to actually make it a lot easier for everyone to do business. And the other thing, I had to throw this out there, our county pays lip service when it comes to actually diversification of our economy. Instead of driving towards other areas that are other sectors of the economy that are available and that we have resources to reach there, right? We've gone more and more, it seems like, towards entertainment. And what happens? We have a huge blowdown like we have right now, and everybody now is out of work. So the city of North Las Vegas, again, we knew that we could not, grow our economy when it comes to more and more entertainment. We looked at other sectors that are right there. They're achievables, and you can go out right now. And the same resources that city of North Las Vegas has, land, access to the Interstate 15, and access to rail, are things that are actually available right now in District D. And there's no reason why we could not turn around and bring way more jobs and turn the fortunes around of the neighborhoods here in District D. You have to have the will, though.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Flanagan, you mentioned in your intro, you talked about healthcare. What would be your first healthcare would be your first priority if elected Clark County Commissioner? What exactly do you intend to achieve, and where in healthcare? Because healthcare is a broad topic. Are we talking about specifics or overall healthcare in general for the constituents of Clark County?
Joe, thanks for that question. It's really a combination of both. What we're talking about, and a lot of my leading in my space as a woman, is talking about healthcare for women and making sure that as we're looking at solutions, women are always at the forefront of thought and consideration. So even as we look at how we're addressing homelessness issues, we're addressing affordable housing issues, we're just addressing job placement, job training, bringing people, diversifying traditional jobs that have traditionally maybe been held by men, making sure there's more accessibility in those job opportunities for women. We see women getting into the trades more now than we maybe have in the past. So as we talk about women in a conversation in health and wellness and healthcare, that's one aspect, making sure that thought is given to women at every level. As far as healthcare itself in the traditional sense, I think District D is already home to UMC, it's home to Valley Hospital, and it's home to a lot of our medical offices. So I think that its location in the Valley makes it ideal for growing healthcare in terms of a medical campus and medical services and making them accessible. And to the point of diversifying industry here and looking at the crisis going on in our nation and needing to take a lead, diversifying industry, I think healthcare is something we're always going to all need. We need resources and services in that space. And I think we can look at ways to bring those resources to District D. We used to have an AIDS clinic that looked at allowing people to have services right in the community in District D when it was running rampant in the African American and minority communities. We no longer have that service there. We can look at things like that to come back. Just giving people better access to care and training, and in that space having jobs that are right in the neighborhood, that as they're getting the training, we're getting better doctors in. Right now I do work with Susan G. Komen, and a lot of what we do targets families that are in wards 5 and wards 3, which are in District D. So looking at increasing those resources and those programs, making sure families have what they need as a whole, and creating jobs, industry diversity, and opportunities. So that's what I'm talking about, and just making sure in every conversation, even as we're dealing with providing services to the homeless, women who are homeless or domestic violence victims, taking into consideration, are we doing our due diligence there? We've seen an increase of domestic violence cases during the coronavirus outbreak. While we can see domestic violence on both sides of the coin, we see a lot more of it where women and children are suffering. So making sure we have resources and help there in cases like that. So it is a broad spectrum of conversation. But I think with the land that we have available and the accessibility off of the interstate and from the different areas of town, industry is ripe to grow in District D. It just needs to be thoughtful, and it needs to mean the amenities that we see all across the valley come to District D, and that's what I'm fighting for. I've always been a long advocate for equality through my work with the Las Vegas Urban Chamber, through my work with the National Urban League, whether we're talking about families as a whole, education, home buying, business development. District D is ripe for these things. We just have to have smart, thoughtful development that increases opportunity, that increases property values. We have some amazing neighborhoods, just like other areas. So there's just a whole broad spectrum of things to talk about with District D. But I think healthcare is an industry that is ripe to grow jobs, to attract doctors. I am a 3-time breast cancer survivor. I have had over 20 procedures here. I have traveled out of state for second and third opinions. I have had my surgeries here. I've been fortunate to have good doctors. It also comes into a health management conversation, and I think we can have a better health management conversation because it's about policies and choices, healthcare that people have access to. I still meet a lot of people who don't have access to good care because they don't have good health insurance.
Okay.
So this is a broad conversation.
Yeah, it's a broad conversation. So I will segue into Hunter Kane. My question is, with the COVID pandemic, and if you should be elected in November, come January, you'll be the county commissioner for District C. What action plan do you have to address the businesses that were affected during COVID? Have you thought of that?
I apologize, Joe. I know you're speaking with me, but I'm having a hard time hearing. I think you asked the question of how I would be able to protect the business.
So the question is, sorry. What action plan do you have to address businesses that were affected during COVID come January of 2021? Can you hear me?
I still apologize. It's coming in.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me move over to Councilmember Rowan. Did you hear the question?
Mm-hmm.
What action?
Oh yeah, I heard the question.
Go ahead and answer, please.
Well, again, I think it might very well take a whole new upper staff, quite frankly, to change the way that things do. Again, you hear all the horror stories of people who are developers, business people who are trying to open up businesses in Clark County, and one obstacle roadblock is put out after another. A guy who all he wants to, he's been tasked to go ahead and redo a parking lot, and it takes 6 months to get basic plans back. When, of course, you could have put people back to work so they have money to take to their home. That's going to have to change, obviously. One thing that I can't get into too many specifics without actually having all the line-by-line items. But one thing that we won't do, of course, the CARES Act, the federal government gave 2 large lumps of money both to the Clark County and to Las Vegas. One thing that I don't see doing in Clark County is giving pay raises to some of the upper management, like Las Vegas is doing right now. Can you imagine if the public knew that while they're going without, many of them either don't qualify for unemployment or have not seen any money from unemployment or never even got their stimulus checks? Can you imagine having to answer the public to give raises disguised as as hazard pay when the rest of the valley had to do without? You have to be extremely judicious with the funds you do get in, number one, and number two, you can't be beaten down on people by raising taxes on businesses and especially on property values. You have to invest, quite frankly, in things that you think are going to grow your economy. Things like education. We have fantastic resources like at CSN. Most people don't realize that we have the only NSA certified internet defense course. Again, the NSA certified, and it's at CSN Cheyenne. Using them, you could very easily harness what you have there, grow lots of tech businesses that you have that you have the resources to right here in the Valley. So again, you can't cut your way to prosperity. You have to be extremely judicious as to where you do spend money. And for God's sakes, giving a few people raise going without, that's ridiculous.
Okay. Oh, Hunter, you're back. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Hunter?
I can hear you a little bit, yes.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Hunter? Can you hear me now? I think he's still having technical difficulties. Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Maybe what you could do is text. Maybe you can go ahead and give them private chat the question.
Yeah. So, sorry. We'll get the questions to you and post it in our thread. Not sure what the technical difficulties with you're having. So my question for you, Tanya, is a lot of the cannabis companies that are licensed in Clark County. I'm a small business owner and I have clients that are in the cannabis space. And we find that during the application process, they were asked to engage in investing in the communities. That has not happened. What will you do as a county commissioner to make sure that these cannabis business license holders, that they'll stick to the information that they promised in their application?
That's a great question, Joe, and I think a really interesting conversation to dive into. And a little bit, it also, and I love it because it ties somewhat into healthcare. As we know, there's both recreational and medical marijuana. So having a conversation about what type of community partnership can come out of that is super healthy, and especially from a healthcare perspective, because there's so many nonprofits, and a lot of times we like to marry for-profit with nonprofits so we can, bridge the gap and provide services that are needed. So if there is a way, and the county has long been a facilitator of collaboration, because that's part of how you have smart government and smart community engagement, is you build that collaboration. So if we can bring our cannabis community businesses together with sometimes certain select nonprofits in a space that's a smart fit. While we, for example, with Komen would have to be very careful about the promoting of cannabis use, we now, with the onset of new legislation of bringing in, hey, it's okay to sell, medical marijuana, we can do different types of partnerships, which means cancer patients who are suffering, we can find ways to help them get what they need. And if there's a way to partner in that space to help, especially in our healthcare space, our patients who are suffering with pain and other challenges, if there's a way to build some type of partnership that way, I would strongly advocate for how do we look at that? How do we make this smart? How do we make this work for the cannabis industry? And say some nonprofits that are very dedicated to servicing cancer patients in our medical community, and how do we bridge a gap there and provide a service and fill a need? So I think that's an awesome opportunity to build a great partnership. If we don't have that in full force now, I would be all about taking a look at how do we do that smartly and effectively.
Okay. Thank you. Hunter, can you hear me now? I don't think Hunter can hear me. The last question that will be directed to you, Councilman Barone and Tanya Flanagan. Why should our viewing audience and those that are listening, why should they vote for you to be County Commissioner for District D? The seat is currently occupied by Commissioner Lawrence Weekly, and he's termed out. And so why should we vote for you to be the next county commissioner? Starting with you, Miss Flanagan.
Well, thank you for the question, Joe. And I would say to a voter, you should vote for me because I have been here doing the work for a really long time. And when I say that, I mean 20 years with the county, but 24 years in the community. And really coming here since I was a child, and my uncle lived in North Valley and my aunt lived in Windsor Park. And I have always been driven, and to whom much is given, much is expected. But I started as a reporter, so I've seen the community through a different lens. I went from that into gaming, so I understand our most powerful industry here. And I've had 20 years with the county, 5 of those first years as the liaison for District D, working with the former county commissioner. So over my 20 years with the county, my work has been directly with Clark County commissioners, understanding county commissioners, county management, and supporting the county's 38 departments and multiple divisions. I handle all of the internet communications for the county. But in addition to that work, firsthand work with the county and the different spaces of communications and policies, changes, programs, parks, I'm also so committed to the community, having served on a number of different boards as a concerned citizen, to make a difference where I could because I care. Former service with the Clark County, with the Las Vegas Urban League, with the Las Vegas Urban Chamber of Commerce, After School All-Stars, Camp Brotherhood, Camp Sisterhood, Susan G. Komen, the Sheriff's African American Advisory Council. Just to throw those out, and then to point at areas of impact. Education for our youth, scholarships provided to kids who couldn't afford it, so families can better afford college or vocational training post high school. Camp Brotherhood, taking kids from the inner city, giving them a chance to see jobs in non-traditional spaces, environmental science, the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, doing that both with Camp Brotherhood, Camp Sisterhood, and also through After School All-Stars, committing to those spaces for years, just because I care and I am concerned. I have ushered in thousands of dollars, more than $50,000 in scholarships for our kids through various organizations, ushering over $250,000 in cash and in-kind donations to support nonprofits, leading the Komen charge for being a part of that for the last 8 years now to help advocate for healthcare for women and families suffering from cancer. And so I would say to a person, I have been boots to the ground for a very long time, committed to this space because I care, and I'm a citizen just like them who saw the need to make change and have impact in the community. And where I could, I got into it and got into the fight and stayed in there to fight for what is right. I'm a strong advocate for equality. And I would say to the person, if you want someone who's going to work hard for you, who understands and who's ready to go, I would look to me. And to have a female voice, because I think it brings a different type of civility to our leadership space.
Thank you.
Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg said a woman should be a part of every process. And so I think that I bring that diversity and that different voice and that experience at the same time to the county commission seat if elected. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Barone?
Yeah, thank you very much. And by the way, I don't know if there's even appropriate for me to say this, but if I weren't in this race, Tanya would be my first choice for this position because of, hey, she was actually nearly my colleague on the North Las Vegas City Council. So I just put a little shout out there, Tanya. The reason why I think I'm the very best choice though for this one, everything that I've actually said I was going to do before I ran for city council and before I got reelected, I've delivered on. A few years ago, I had a businessman laugh in my face when I told him that, hey, if we're to put in an interchange at I-15 and 215 and run a little bit of water out here by the Speedway, we could probably court and bring in billions of dollars of investment. I had a businessman laugh in my face about that. But you know what? Working together with the rest of the city council and ushering in all the different stakeholders and resources from different agencies, I made it happen. Every other thing that I said I was going to do, whether it was going to be improving the quality of life, streamlining government, getting our city back on, I did it as part of a team. And what separates me from everybody else is vision. And the vision that I offer are things that are actually deliverable. They're not pie in the sky kind of visions, where that are not deliverable. These are things that have actually impacted people right here in my city. Just here, another little one here. One of the very first things that I said when we had my first town hall, the number one thing that people in the downtown area were worried about was crime. it was graffiti. Without raising taxes, without having to beat down on any more children, brown and black children, right, who are oftentimes the little kids who are out there the most, we're able to think very creatively and make an app that actually gets graffiti taken off the city wall, guaranteed by 72 hours. Usually, it's the same day. And again, we did it without, I did it by marshaling resources that were already available, without having to raise any taxes, and without having to put, again, children of color into the criminal system. What I offer is things that I can actually, a vision that is actionable and achievable. And if I can earn your vote, I'm not going anywhere. I'm a high school teacher at heart. I've lived in here. I've lived most of my 50 years. I've lived here right in the district, and I live in downtown North Las Vegas. Knock on a door, come by, talk about if you have some good ideas. Maybe we'll incorporate it into the overall vision. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. Why should we elect you Clark County Commissioner, District 3?
Well, there's a number of reasons, and I think top on that list is that right now, especially during these times, we need county commissioners who are innovative. So one of the things that I've always prided myself on is that, nobody has all the answers, but when you utilize those community partners to come together, we can usually come up with a solution better than an individual politician and or committee could actually come up with. You should vote for me because it's about time that we have a little more diversity on our commission. One of the things I'm very proud to be able to represent the LGBTQ community, the African American community, to represent the military community, and those single foster fathers that are out there. We're few far in between, but we are still out there. There's a lot of organizations out there that are already throwing their support behind me. We're talking about both sides of the aisle. There are plenty of people that are Republican, Democrats, nonpartisan independents that believe that Hunter Kane is the best choice. In all this world of partisan bickering, in the military, we kind of have this mentality of, I don't care what party you belong to. I care if you can get the job done correctly. And one of the things that I know how to do is get the job done correctly. On top of that, one of the main things that I've always enjoyed about this community is, this community has embraced me. I moved here in 2004 after I got out of the military the first time, just to serve in the National Guard and then get back in the military a second time. But the community has always rallied behind me, and I've always rallied behind it. Meaning that when it comes to, whether it's me volunteering at the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth, whether it's me becoming a parent taking in some of these at-risk youth, whether it's me rolling up my sleeves. I mean, even during this pandemic, I've been teaching my boys, it's about volunteering. So what do? The Vegas Pantry. We're volunteering at the VA and the Armed Forces Chamber. We're volunteering at any and every organization. Our next door neighbor and I, we've been donating her cloth as we cut it out, and she's making masks for people that we're just giving away. So voting for me means that you're voting for someone who's passionate about the job that he's doing. I don't want to insult any of my fellow candidates that are here and or that are running against me. But it's not just a stepping stone. The commission is not after you do this job or after you do that job, then finally you get to the commission. We need people who are passionate about the programs. I'm passionate about DFS. The foster care system falls up under there. I'm passionate about the juvenile justice courts. I'm passionate about fixing the homeless issue. I'm passionate about these issues, which is why I'm running for this office.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Hunter, Tanya Flanagan, and Councilman Barone for participating in this evening's candidate forum. Best of luck.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much. For the viewing audience, if you have already mailed or dropped off your ballot, you can double check to make sure it has been received by going to the Nevada Secretary of State's website, and it's on the screen. Input your information and click on the voting tab, and that will let you know whether or not your ballot has confirmed that your ballot is at the secretary, has been received by the elections office. Also, if you have not yet voted, go to the Secretary of State's website and the information will be on the screen as well, and you can get some information as to voting. The deadline is June 9th, so we ask that you vote, 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 and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the Candidates Forum for Clark County Commission District C and D. And we want to again thank Hunter Kane, Tanya Flanagan, and Councilman Barone for participating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the evening. Stay safe.
Yes. Thank you.
Joe,
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So today, last week I got on the phone with my friend, Coach Canna, and watching the television was so exhausting, and we just couldn't think of what we could do to make a difference in our community. And so we thought a community conversation with community leaders and stakeholders would allow us to talk about things. So as we go into segment 2 for tonight, I want to thank you all for staying the course with us. And we will use this opportunity to unpack what's happening locally and nationally. And I just want to say to my global friends that are watching, we see you. To the protesters, we hear you. To the mom and pop and all businesses that were impacted by the destruction of property, we sympathize with you. To the families that have lost loved ones to senseless, horrific killings, we feel your pain and we understand you're hurting. To the agitators that are attempting to take away from the message, it will not work because we will remain focused. And that's the message we want to leave here with tonight. So to my viewing audience, pull up a chair, let's talk. And this is going to be a great conversation as we introduce our guests. Allison Stevens has joined us. We're expecting 2 others. So what we will do, we will start the conversation and then they can join us as we go along. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to watch our Attorney General, Aaron Ford, and community leaders in a virtual town hall. He talked about the systematic racism and police brutality that continue to plague our country. If you missed the town hall, we're going to repost the link below. And voting matters because of the Attorney General that we have right now, and elections have consequences. So thank you, Attorney General Ford, in your role as Attorney General and for your leadership. We appreciate it. As we see the scenes and the call for justice play out locally and nationally and watch it intersect with looting and vandalism in an attempt to take away from the peaceful and courageous demonstration and responsible demonstration, my question is for Allison Stevens, who has joined us. How do we change the narrative so it takes root, so our children and grandchildren are not having the same conversation that we're having today 20 years from now?
Thank you, Joe, for inviting me on. I think we have changed the conversation, and this has been a particularly important and poignant moment in history. I think you'll see that over the past however many years, actually hundreds of years, we've had the same fight, but there comes these opportunities and moments where things rise to a level where they cannot be ignored. And absolutely, we sympathize with businesses and people who have lost property. This is also a moment where it feels like a rebellion. And we have seen, as you said, this spread across the globe so that voices are not going unheard in the way that they have in the past. There is something special about this moment that I think is so important that cannot be ignored. And we saw that President Trump tried to ignore it, and even he has to address the nation. It won't go away this time, and I think you have the right sort of perfect storm of all of the things that led up to this, as far as crimes against people of color. And I want to emphasize, Black men definitely have to live with this fear, but let's not forget Breonna Taylor or any of the other Black women who have had to suffer as well. So Black bodies have been undergoing this for quite some time. And you saw all of these little incidents happening, little pockets of people protesting, being upset. And then you combine that with Corona and the fact that a lot of people aren't at work. And so guess what they can do? They can go out to the streets and they can protest and they can make their voice heard. And when you see that happening in Berlin, and you see it happening in our prisons also right now, this is not going to be ignored. This is the moment that we've been wanting to have happen, where we don't get pushed by the wayside, and something has to happen. And when you see
joining us, Pastor Harris. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Harris will give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and I did not do that with you, Allison. I apologize. Pastor Harris, will you introduce yourself to our viewing audience, please?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Harris. I'm the founder and senior pastor of the Power Center Church.
Pastor Harris.
Clinical social work.
Opportunity to introduce yourself, and I did not do that with you.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Anthony Harris, founder and senior pastor of the Power Center Church, licensed clinical social worker and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I'm so glad to be talking with you all on the day.
Thanks. So, Pastor Harris, as a mental health professional as well as a leader, how does the trauma and secondary traumatic stress through images across the media platforms that we're seeing in our state and we're seeing across the nation, how does that affect our community, and what's the path to true peace, which includes justice?
Oh, well, it definitely affects our community. Let me share something with you all real quick. We understand that there is a mental health disorder called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and which is it's an anxiety disorder where there's a trauma that occurs in someone's life that negatively begins to affect their lives in some kind of way, shape, form, or fashion. There is an explanatory theory called post-traumatic slave syndrome that is very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. However, it is a theory that was developed by another social worker, Dr. Joy LeGroux, and she posited that from generation to generation, because of the stressful situations that happens in African Americans' lives, from generation to generation, they're passed down. It's not just a single event that happens, but it's something that's passed down. And so today, what we're hearing a lot on the television through the riots and so forth is that I'm not being heard, I'm frustrated, I'm tired. Well, for many of us, we may not have directly been exposed to racist acts and so forth, but because of that, those traumas being passed down, many of us who may not have directly experienced it, we still feel that feeling, we still feel that emotion, we still feel that anger, we still feel that because of it's a trauma that's being passed down from generation to generation, and we haven't not yet learned how to stop it. And so when we see things like this on television, where our people that looks like us are getting beat down and killed and murdered right there in the street, and then we feel so helpless sometimes. That has to do with that's a traumatic event that has to do with generations of traumas that have occurred. And so again, you're seeing people so angry that may not have directly affected us, which is something that PTSD does not have to directly happen to you. You can actually witness a trauma and it can be traumatic to you. And this is what's happening in the African-American community for the past several generations, is we keep seeing trauma after trauma after trauma, and no one is, it doesn't seem as we're being heard or we're being understood, which is why you hear a lot of people say, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and they're acting out in certain ways and that helps them to deal with particular traumas that's going on, and they're seeing every day on CNN and MSNBC and so forth and so on over all the channels.
So from a spiritual standpoint, and this question is for you as well, Pastor Harris, from a spiritual standpoint, how do we engage our youth? Because they're seeing what's going on the television, they have lost hope. Because I have a 13-year-old and I have grown children, and I have to have these conversations, even though they're adults and they have their own families.
Right.
How engage the youth for them to move beyond this point?
That's a good question. You know, I believe in God, and I believe that God is still omnipotent. He's still powerful. He's not this weak God that we make him out to be. He's still God, and he's still on the throne, and everything that's going on in society did not take him by surprise. He's still God. But God is obviously spiritual. But God is a God that engages in prayer, but he also engages in action. So we begin to tell young people that God is a God of action, that God is not just a God that just sits back and just wants us to pray to him. He does wants us to pray to him, but that's so that he can get into our business. So we start to engage the young people to let the young people know God has not forgotten about them, so don't forget about God. Because God is the God of action. He's still on the throne. Nobody's going to take God off the throne. I don't care who's in the White House. Nobody's going to take over God's house. So one of the things that from a spiritual perspective is just to let people know that God is still in control, but God is not a passive God. God is a God of action. This is why we believe in protesting. We don't believe in the rioting. We don't believe in the burning. We don't believe in the looting. But we do believe of speaking up for what's right. The Bible teaches us that we are to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. We are to speak up for the oppressed. We are to speak up for the poor. We are to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. So if you really want to be engaged in what's going on in society, that's okay. Just don't forget about God, because God has not forgotten about you.
Okay. Today I was researching online, getting prepared for this, and I came across a statement former President Barack Obama, and I quote, he said, "Elected officials who matter most in reforming police departments and criminal justice system work at the state and local levels. The more specific we can make demands for criminal justice and police reform, the harder it will be for elected officials just to offer lip service to the cause and fall back in business as usual when protests and all of that is gone." My question for you, Allison, you as a former elected official, so you could probably speak to us in that vein. As voters, how do we get engaged and stay engaged in the electoral process in order to effect change?
Well, first, I want to say it's not just voters. So I think we have a fallacy out there that somehow if you chose not to vote in the last election, or you feel disenfranchised by the system, that, oh, you don't have the right to speak up. We all have those rights. It's in the Constitution, and it's also God-given, right? So it's not just voters, but it is really important to understand what those asks are. And as you mentioned, I'm a former elected. I also represent Nevada at the Democratic National Committee. And so one of the questions that I've been asking as Secretary of the Black Caucus is, what are our collective asks? And I think it's twofold. So President Obama is correct. A lot of what's happening is at the local level. However, if we look historically in our country, civil rights has never made progress at the local level until the federal government intervened. And so it is critically important that we think about this presidential election and that we think about the Senate races and the congressional races. Because if you recall, you think back to George Wallace, right, or all of those moments, it was the federal government intervening, because oftentimes it is very challenging when for local officials to actually implement civil rights and to move things forward. So we have to act on both fronts, and we have to have people in all of those spaces. There have to be the people out in the streets protesting, because that's the activism that raises the issue, that puts it on people's minds, that keeps it on TV, that makes sure that nobody can ignore it. And then you have to have people working at the local level, the state level, and then absolutely having that enforcement at the federal level. And we'll have an opportunity to move those issues forward, as you just had some candidates for local races on a few minutes ago. And we have to be engaged in those races. We have to be engaged in this presidential race that's coming up if we want to be able to see the sustained progress that we need at a policy level in order to make this change happen.
Protest highlights the deep racial disparities in the U.S. I'm an immigrant, and I have had the opportunity to raise my family and to live a damn good life. I'm living good. And it's because of the opportunities that were presented to me, so I'm able to raise my family, and we embrace this country. As we look at the anger, the despair on display with hundreds of underscore and long, there's a long disconnect. And so I want to talk about disconnect I want to talk about disconnect. The Black families are locked out of prosperity, income gaps, broken criminal justice system. With all these disconnects, our children will not have a future. How do we as adults lay that foundation going forward, so the disconnection that we're experiencing and people before me have experienced, and so to eliminate it, a cycle going on for the next 400 years, where do we start? And so I'll start with you, Anthony. Where do we start?
Well, I think we start where basically what you're talking about is getting that connection back. I was raised as a young boy in the 70s and 80s. And during that particular time, everybody was your mom and daddy. Everybody was had permission to correct you and to raise you to some degree. And now, obviously, with the use of technology, which thank God for technology, but now that has caused a major disconnect within families and what have you. Even in our own homes, we're separated even now more in our own homes than ever before. And so, what you're talking about there, that disconnect is just that: get reconnected with each other, with the family unit, and began to develop that kind of foundation. Obviously, during this pandemic time, this quarantine time, there was plenty of time for families to actually do that, to get more connected, because we couldn't go anywhere. I'm not quite sure which families actually took advantage of that particular time frame, but what you're talking about is just that: to get reconnected with the family, how we used to do it at least when I was growing up. That's how we used to do it.
Allison?
Yeah, I want to share one of these fancy terms that politicians use, and it's called ethnic bifurcation. And it's one of those things that was a byproduct of desegregation, which we never got to integration, but we did do some desegregation. And what that meant is that our communities sort of fell apart. At a minimum, during segregation, we were all together. Our children were going to the same schools. We had that sense of community. But right now, what you see is a few of us are able to climb the corporate ladder a little bit, make a little bit of change, and then we all move out and forget and leave everyone behind. And it's one of these phenomenons that's really, really historically has been only visible within the Black American community. Other communities tend to not do that. And so one of the things that we have to do is one, stop leaving each other behind. Because I have a little success, then I go off and then I forget where I came from and never reinforce or put back into my own community, my childhood home, the schools, and those kinds of things. But we also can't be embarrassed to be Black and to support each other. One of the things that I've seen on social media recently that I've had to question is these posts of, if you're my white friend, I want you to know I see you and it's okay. Why are we embarrassed to say that our lives matter? And why do we need to justify that to the people in our lives who are non-Black? So I think part of it is us remaining in our communities. And I'm not saying you can't go get a nice home. What I'm saying is that you should be doing volunteer work. We need to be giving contributions financially. We need to be thinking about our communities when we vote. It's not just your new address that matters. But then we also need to remember our collective community and not be ashamed and embarrassed to support each other as we move forward to make sure that these changes happen. I'm Black. I'm proud of being Black. I support Black businesses. I support the Black economy. I support my Black children. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think I need to justify it. And if we can do that, then I think we'd be in a much better place when it comes to the community and how we move forward.
I agree. As we look across the nation and we see police riot gear, and the president came out today and he implemented some law from 1817 or 1819 about that. Oh, thanks for joining, Miss Erica. Erica Washington just joined us. Thank you very much. And we were talking about. I know you're busy, so thank you for joining. We were talking about disconnect and the disconnection of the Black families. They're locked out of prosperity, income gap, broken criminal justice system. And our discussion is, with all these disconnection and with our children, how do we break that cycle? What do we do now to break that cycle to eliminate disconnection? And I know with your work with women and children and social justice that you are able to shed some light on that, to say, as a parent, what do we need to be doing now to help break that disconnection?
Joe, what I think a part of the disconnection comes from, and speaking from personal experience, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandparents, I did everything with them. I spent so much time with them all the time. I was a daddy's girl to my grandfather, yet, and they both passed away, some years ago. But I can honestly say there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot of history, family history, that I just don't know, that I don't know that I will ever know, because they are gone. And a part of it was they didn't want to bring up old stuff. You didn't talk about the past. You didn't raise sand. You didn't spend so much time worrying about what used to be, and instead of like what was now. And so I think a part of that disconnect is that, we miss out on a lot of things, of really understanding our history and understanding the history of our families and our community and the things that folks went through, so that we can really understand just how far we have come and how far we still have to go. So I think how we break that cycle is having really open and honest dialogue with our children, not leaving them out of conversations because they are too young, or, we shouldn't talk about that. And that goes not just for Black folks, that goes for white folks too. Like, if you're not having these conversations, then, nothing ever changes. So how do we break that cycle? It is really communication, and it really is about, being able to show our own vulnerability, because I think what comes with all of that is parents having to show that they are scared sometimes, or a lot of the times, and that they don't have all of the answers, and we are just doing the best that we can to protect our children, and that we're not trying to necessarily scare them, but but give them enough of a frighten to know that, things can be very scary out in the real world. And so the disconnect, I think, honestly just becomes from communication. And it's really hard, especially when you don't feel like you have the language or the words, because you don't know if you feel angry or sad or frustrated or what have you, or if you should just kind of bend and go with the flow because you don't want to get killed, or, you want to stand up and scream. And there's so many different emotions that have, run through us at any given moment, and all of those emotions in the last week. So, but our children need to know that, and they need to see that, and they need to know that it's okay to unpack all of that too, and know how to deal with it and deal with their friends and their family, and those around them.
Okay. Pastor Harris, from a spiritual and mental health capacity, when is the right time to start having these conversations with our children? The violence, the demonstration, the deaths are playing out on television. When is the right time, or is there a right time to have that conversation with our children?
Yeah, the right time is now. I mean, the right time is right now. You want to be honest with them because they see it all the time now. Just the other day, my son came to me and he had two action figures, and one was a Black Panther and one was a Shazam. And he laid it down. I was working on my computer, and he laid it down. He laid the Black Panther down on his stomach, and he had the Shazam action figure and put the knee on the neck of the Black Panther. And he said, "Daddy, is this how the man killed this man?" He said, "Yes, son. That's how he did it. That's how he did it." My son is 5. He's 5. And so had to tell him, and his mother as well. My wife and I, we told him, and my other children. I have a daughter that's 12, a daughter that's 9, and my son is 5. And we had to just tell them that this is what's going on in the world today. And we use the word die. We use the word kill. We use the word murder. We use the words that's going on. We don't try to sugarcoat it. We don't put everything on them because they're too young to understand some things, but we do let them know. And we do talk with our children regarding what's going on in Minnesota and all over the country now regarding what's going on. So, and your children look better than I do, but it's good to tell your children the truth about what's going on. Allow them to process what's going on. You help them to process that which they're hearing, so they're not getting wrong information, and they'll be able to process it and move forward and understand what's going on in their society.
Okay. Allison, for you, how do we change the narrative? Can we change the narrative at all?
Again, I think we have changed the narrative. This was a situation that I don't think anybody could deny. And I think we've seen it so many times where it's blatant in front of our faces, and you'll hear people say, "Oh, we need the investigation," and dredge up what somebody did when they were a teenager, and all about these things that are inconsequential. And this time around, it was just so blatant. And I think it was after, there have been so many instances where this has happened. That I think the narrative is now going to be, we brought the attention to the issue. And I think that's critical. And we have to maintain that attention, because that's what's going to motivate policymakers to action. So now it's about, how do we frame what the ask is? What is it specifically as far as policies related to police and authority figures, but also our criminal justice system overall? Because it's not just police, it's also, we saw what happened to poor Ahmaud. We understand what happened to Trayvon. These are just, white folks who are empowered by a flawed criminal justice system. And so we have to figure out, what are the policies that we specifically want passed? And then we work with our elected officials, we work with our faith leaders, and we work with, wonderful organizations like Make It Work Nevada, in order to make sure that those policies actually come to fruition, now that we've grasped the world's attention. And organizations like Amnesty International are saying, hey, this is inappropriate, the way that the United States has continued to treat Black folks over a period of time.
Okay. My question is for you, Erica. In terms of policies and with the high unemployment that we're looking at right now, we have Black women, Black families that are deeply impacted because a lot of the families were first line essential workers and they might not be working right now and they're having issues with childcare and thing. With what's happening now, what type of policies would you like to see in place to help families that are of the lowest income, that are severely impacted, so they can at least have some normalcy in their lives?
I think you asked a couple different questions in there, and you're focusing on a couple different segments of the population, but everything is connected, right? Like the cycle of poverty is a cycle of poverty for a reason. So it's not one thing, it's all the things. So we need paid sick days, right? There are so many folks who are frontline workers now called frontline workers. Before they were just blue collar or not even, just barely even thought of workers, as far as like grocery store clerks and what have you. People didn't spend much time thinking about them as people. And now all of a sudden they're saving us. And so we need to treat those who are doing the hard work, who keep us running. We need to treat them with wages that will give them their version of the American dream. A living wage, which, for the longest time, folks were fighting for 15 an hour. That's basically obsolete now. When you look at what it takes to actually have affordable rent, and then you have your utilities and all of those things, at $15 an hour just won't cut it, not to start to raise a family and anything like that. And so fighting for a living wage is really important, but we need those paid sick days because I think a lot of COVID might have been quelled for a lot of different reasons, but there are a lot of folks who are going to continue to go to work when they are sick because they don't feel like they have the choice to do something else. Not because they want to get anybody sick, not because they don't want to take the time off, but knowing they don't have it and they could lose their job, or they will have unpaid time off and then they won't be able to pay their bills. And so you make the choice that you feel like you have to make, and you can't see necessarily the bigger picture. So, it needs to be where people have the option to be able to take care of themselves. That shouldn't be a luxury. You have paid sick days or paid family leave. Paid family leave is needed when you need to take care of your loved one. Someone might have COVID or anything else. Cancer is still around. All the other things that happens is not just maternity and paternity leave. It is also just to be able to take care of yourself or take care of the people that you go to work for in the first place. And so when you can't do that, it lowers morale. It causes so many other issues. We have an issue with housing, being really unaffordable for most people and not being able to afford a decent place to live. That needs to be taken care of. We need to talk about maternal mortality. Black women are dying more so than anybody else, and when having children, and then Black children are more likely to die, after childbirth, and then they're more likely to die in the streets. So it's not one thing. There's so many things that I need for folks, especially our Democrats, our folks who want to be considered, progressive, fight for the people, to not be scared to say we need all of these things and we need them now. That it's not, let's just do this one thing. We have to do them all simultaneously. Otherwise, you're not actually going to help anybody.
Right. As we close out, and we want to leave on a positive note, and so our viewing audience that is watching us know that there's hope. So I'll start with Allison. And so we leave on a positive note to say, we've got this. We're going to work through this and things will be okay. We're going through some challenging times right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you just said it, Joe. We are going to be okay. we've been through these kinds of challenging times, but you see just right here, Joe, you brought together, a group of leaders in the community. Before we came on, you had people who were pursuing elected office, and a lot of people who are Black and brown and understand these issues, who are from our communities, that are doing good work. And I think it can't be overstated, the number of people that I encounter, that I know the other, folks who are here encounter, who are out there and have been out there doing the work. And so we will continue to fight. We will continue to move forward, and we will see some changes, because there's so many of us who are putting in the time, putting in the energy, and holding, those who have positions to make these kinds of changes accountable.
Okay,
So we'll
thank
make it
you.
be better for
Thank
it.
you. Erica, close out.
Sure. I encourage everyone to, stop and take a moment and really think about where we are right now, and that we are all where we are supposed to be at this exact moment, that we are the ones ready to make change. We are the ones capable to do it. And so otherwise we wouldn't be in this position right now. So we need to be able to really dig deep and decide, what side of right we want to be on, and how far we're willing to push, and then push a little bit further, because we have it in us. And, I can recommend 10,000 different books that people can read around organizing and around policy and around, the Black Lives Matter movement and around movement in general, if anyone wants to reach out to me. But I think we have what we need right now, and we can't wait. So I implore people to get involved, to get as involved as they possibly can, because the time is now.
Thank you. Pastor Harris?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak. I thank you for that very much. There is hope. There is hope. And Black people have been experiencing this for a long, long time. And so we understand what it means to go through things, but we are overcomers. We are people that have overcome tremendous odds and tremendous incidences in American history. And this is just one of them. I do believe, first of all, again, as I go back, God is still on the throne. We've made God out to be this sit back God that just kind of does nothing, but God is still on the throne, and he desires action. He wants us to act. And so as we keep him first, he's going to do what he does. He's going to do what he does. He gives all of us hope. He is hope. And so while we keep him in the center of what we do, he's going to give us direction. He's going to give us wisdom, but he wants us to act on it. So this is why we want to be active in the political arena, in social services, in business, in banking, in education, in social, whatever it might be, to be able to do that. And so even for yourself, I want to applaud you for the work that you do in our community, and for all the others, for Allison and for Erica and for all the other ones that were on the line, on the broadcast before me. I want to thank you for all of your hard work, and we just want to keep doing what we're doing. There is hope. We're going to get through this. And when we do, we're going to come out, as they say, as pure gold. We're going to be all right. We're going to be all, we got a history of being all right. We're going to be all right.
Thank you so much. We're going to be all right. Thank you, Erica Washington, Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada. And if you're not familiar with them, follow them on Facebook and make sure you're engaged. Allison Stevens, former regent, and she is the current DNC committee woman for the state of Nevada. That's correct. And Pastor Harris, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you agree with this conversation this afternoon.
God bless you.
Thank you. So before we leave, I am going to before we leave, thank you so much for watching. We did our best to make sure we kept it at 45 minutes because I know folks are busy. And as soon as my broadcast ends, candidate C.H. Miller, his live broadcast starts with Reimagine Vegas. And so that starts at 7. So make sure you go to his Facebook page to see what's additional things are new and exciting in our community. And also remember to vote. The last day to vote is June 9th. And if you have already mailed in your ballot, you can check the Secretary of State website, and it's on the screen, and you could type, key in your name, date of birth, last 4 digits of your social security number, as well as your driver's license number. And that, when you enter that information, you can get a history of your voting record, and it will also show if your ballot has been, if the mail got to the elections office. So you can check your ballot to make sure that it has been received. And again, the information is on the screen. Also, the information is on the screen. I'm going fast. The information is on the screen. That's nvsos.gov voter search. And so we'll make sure that we add it to the live post as well, so you can check your ballot to make sure. And also Mail It in Nevada is another website managed by the Secretary of State that you can watch and get additional instructions on how to complete your ballot. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. I am Jo Cato. I'm a small business owner. I'm the CEO and founder of Periwinkle Group, a local communications and public affairs firm here in Vegas. And we've been in business for 12 years, thank God. We're going through a recession right now, but as the last 3 guests said, we will be all right. So thank you for joining us, and it was a pleasure spending my afternoon with you. Peace.